Hello there. If you're new to the channel, my name is Tane Nix. Welcome, and please give us a like and subscribe if you're interested in the topic and you enjoy the show. My guest today is Michael Yan. I've been aware of Michael's work for quite some time. He's a real life badass. He was not only in the special forces, I believe, but also became a combat correspondent. There's certain levels of reporting that can happen in war zones, and most of the people covering wars are, of course, very far from the action. Michael actually gets into the reported from firefights, right, with guys around him getting shot. He actually had to take part in a shootout one time when the unit that he was covering was pinned down and guys were getting killed and panicking and all the rest. He picked up a weapon and actually had to stand his ground and help lend a hand. And so he's the real deal. He knows what he's talking about. And that's why I asked him to come on, because what Michael's going to share with you in this is going to sound really outlandish to people. But when somebody like Michael, with his experience, his deep knowledge of the world, man travels 365 days a year, he is always reading or reporting on the ground on what's happening right in front of his very eyes. He spent a ton of time in Panama, which is where I'm talking to him today. And he spent a lot of time at the Darien Gap, which is about to get a bit of an upgrade thanks to the Chinese, that will really make things very, very easy for people all over South America to make it through that very slender portion of Central America and keep marching north to the US border. So we're in for wild and crazy times. I asked Michael all the difficult questions that you're probably wondering and hoping somebody will ask and asking yourself, which is how exactly this is allowed to go on, with the full knowledge of people running big, gigantic, multinational and sort of globalist institutions like the United Nations, like the WEF, like the WHO, et cetera, et cetera. The answers, of course, are not shocking or they're not surprising, but they are disturbing. And so you need to hear this from a guy who's actually on the ground reporting on this stuff. It's just a fascinating discussion. Michael's a really, really excellent guy to be hearing from at this time. And by all means, I hope you take action to protect yourself from whatever chaos is still coming. We have probably many, many years ahead of us. It's not going to be like it was in the last 50 to 80 years, right? We're entering a period where all the old rules no longer apply. And so that's why I put together a short blueprint, 56-page book I call the Bulletproof Plan B. This is the important information that I would want if our roles were reversed after spending 25 years on the road and internationalizing my life in multiple different countries. You need to know how to do this, and you need to know how to do it quickly. And you also need to know how to do it affordably. This is the kind of information that gurus selling all kinds of expensive consulting online charge tens of thousands of dollars for. You can find out the basic fundamentals for yourself and even get some of these steps done for nothing. I'm giving this away free to people. If you want to talk to me or you read the book and you want some help setting anything up, please get in touch with me. I give you a way to do that as well. Check out the Bulletproof Plan B in the show notes and enjoy this wonderful, wide-ranging talk with Michael Yan. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Expat Files. I have a special guest today, a gentleman that I met recently in Buenos Aires, but whose work I was familiar with for quite some time. Fascinating guy, super interesting character, one of the really interesting people, and also a heavy dude, a very serious man, the kind of guy that you can't ignore easily. And what I heard him say when he presented at a recent gathering in Argentina was a bit jarring, to be honest. And so I wanted him to get his message out to all of you. Michael, I'm talking about Michael Yan. Michael, welcome. Thanks very much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Tane. I've left Argentina. We were down there for a couple of months, and now up in Panama City.
Yes.
We were actually going to do more work down in Argentina, and then Trump made a statements about Panama and the Panama Canal, and we just canceled everything, and flew straight back to Panama.
That was wild.
We spent a lot of time in Panama, though, because this is one of the most important pieces of real estate on planet Earth geostrategically, and it has been for a long, long time, long before any of us were born. This was the spot, and there's been movies made here and everything else, and the scene of much intrigue, whether that be international finance with the banking or smuggling of drugs or whatever. I mean, this is key terrain.
I'm going to turn it over to you here, Michael, because I want you to tell the story that you're tracking. I know you spend a lot of time both in Panama City, where you are, and where the UN headquarters still is, and we're going to get an update from you on that. But I know also that you have intimate knowledge of the Darien Gap and what's going on down there. Quick anecdote, though, before I do. It is an intriguing place, isn't it? Panama Canal, the whole area there is fascinating. I spend regular, I have regular visits to Panama, and this would have been 2 or 3 years ago. I got pulled over, and I'm not making this up. A cop asked me if I was actually in the CIA or FBI. I mean, this is a regular cop writing me a ticket for, I guess I was, driving too fast, whatever he pulled me over for. And they shake you down, and you get asked these kind of questions. And I suppose I look vaguely military, or they probably do see a lot of guys. I doubt they speak as good as Spanish as I do, but maybe they do. I don't know how the CIA gets trained in language, but I was fascinated because there is a vibe of danger, of intrigue. I imagine there's all kinds of stuff going on behind closed doors at 3 a.m. in Panama. Obviously, the amount of commerce and the amount of smuggling that must come through that country because of the presence of the canal. And I slowly came to the conclusion that you mentioned when we talked in Argentina, which is if the wheels come off and there's a great power conflict, which is highly likely, the Panama Canal is too big of an asset for big powers like China, like the United States. I mean, that's practically on our front doorstep, and obviously we have a massive, massive interest, both commercially and strategically there. There's no possibility that that place remains peaceful if there's a real slugfest, which we hope doesn't happen. But anyway, it was funny that I was coming to the same conclusion that you stated very clearly in no uncertain terms, and so tell people what's going on. Tell them about what you see. I know you wrote a book on this, right? The weaponization of immigration and what's really happening in Panama.
Right. Panama, of course, is a crossroads of the world in many regards. First of all, there's the Panama Canal, which opened in 1914. But even long before the Panama Canal was open, this was always sorry, the cleaning lady's here.
We can't hear.
Good. Oh, it's a great microphone. So so even before the Panama Canal opened, it was a scene. No, go ahead. Even before the Panama Canal opened, it was a scene of a lot of intrigue. For instance, Scotland went bankrupt here. So Scotland, they tried to make an interoceanic corridor in the late 1690s, right? And they failed. They went bankrupt. And that's why Scotland was absorbed by the United Kingdom.
That's
because
wild.
in 1706, in the Articles of Union, in 1706, that's why Scotland is part of the United Kingdom today, is because they went bankrupt, and partly a big part was because they went bankrupt here in Darien, right? And then France, of course, with their, I guess you would call it an attempt at making the canal. They seem to make more statues than the survey stakes. I mean, France didn't seem deadly serious about making the canal, but they definitely went bankrupt. And then the United States came through and then made the canal, right? Now, keep in mind, the first city in the Americas that was not on an actual island, but was on, one of the continents, North, South, or Central America, was actually in the Darien, right? It's called
Wow.
Santa Maria la Antigua del Darien. It's almost forgotten. Almost nobody remembers anything about it. But it started in 1510 in the Darien on the Columbia, what's now the Columbia side. And then it lasted for about 14 years, and then the Indians wiped it out. And now, it's no longer there. But so literally this has always been important. The Panama and Colombia and the Panama Isthmus has always been, well, since at least the 1500s, one of the most important places, either already was or was emerging as such, and now it 100% is one of the most important places on earth.
Yeah, east to west, obviously, but now north to south because of what's happening, right? I mean, if the Darien opens, what does that do? I mean, I know you've reported on China sends people to Ecuador because they can get in easy, and then if the Darien opens, like it's game on, right? Because then anybody can come north all the way, like any part of South America. All you got to do is trek through there. So, what's
It
the
is.
status on that? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, weapons of mass migration.
There
It's
you
like,
go.
if I don't know if it's popping up in there, but I
Yep.
mean, this is a long game plan. Sometimes when you say the weaponization of migration, people look at you and roll their eyes, but it's because they're quite ignorant, actually. They look at you like you're ignorant, but I'm like, you're telling me about, banking and you don't know how to do addition, actually. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's seriously, because this is
Right.
the major weapons in warfare since
Yeah.
millennia, right? Since millennia. And anybody who's honestly studied war or done war knows how important the weapons of mass migration is. It's one of the WMD, right? It's a weapon of mass destruction. But a lot of people don't realize that because they know nothing about war, right? And so, one of the books I found inside the Darien Gap, weirdly, is The Wealth of Nations. You can't
No
believe make
kidding.
up the stuff. Can't make up the stuff. It's in a village near the Colombian border, way out in the jungle. There's no road out there.
Crazy.
It's called Puerto Obaldia. And I
Scouts
asked
are
if I
everywhere.
could, I was like, this book is going to rot out here. And, The Wealth of Nations, you can't make it up. So, and I asked if I could have it, and they gave it to me. It's interesting that way out in the jungle, I mean, Puerto Obaldia, if you look it up on the map, you'll see where it's at. It's right on the Colombian border in Panama. And somebody's out there studying this. There's the seeds are out there. People realize how important this area is. And for instance, China is working hard to take the Darien. They're cutting down huge numbers of trees. I'm down there all the time. They're building a road to Colombia. Now, people all the time reflexively say it's impossible to build a road to Colombia. I'm like, hey, man, see the mud on my boots? I mean, seriously, I know for 100% fact that they're building it there because I found it, right? And now it's all over the news, right? And I took my team down there later, Burning Edge team, and you can see they're building 2 bridges right now. It's going to eventually connect Colombia.
If you're worried about the financial and monetary systems, geopolitical tensions, central bank triggering runaway inflation, and what all the above will do to your wealth, well, you should be. The question isn't whether or not you should own gold. The real question is, do you have enough? It doesn't really matter what happens with Bitcoin, interest rates, spiraling debt costs, or any other variable in our increasingly chaotic world. Why? Because the solution to all those risks is the same, and because central banks from Beijing to Moscow, Singapore to Switzerland, are all telling you what their answer will be when the wheels come off. It's gold, dummy. That's why I use the all-in-one dealer and vaulting service SWP Cayman. Why? Because you can buy and sell right from your online dashboard, and SWP protects you from any risk of government confiscation or capital controls. They offer vaulting services in Grand Cayman and half a dozen other jurisdictions all around the world. It's convenient, it's fast, and it lets you move a big chunk of your legacy wealth outside the financial system quickly, while still allowing you to sell and move funds anywhere in the world when the time comes. To get set up with an account at SWP, go to swpcayman.com/ChristianNix. That's www.swpcayman.com/Christian-Nix. Michael, can you describe for people, like, what is the topography? Like, what is the gap, right? What is I mean, obviously it blocks South America. It blocks easy migration from South America through to Central America. But what is the gap? Is it a mountainous region? Is it just impassable forests and mountains? Like, what are the Chinese actually up against in order to create a main thoroughfare through there?
Right. It's the continental divide, actually. So, so it's the northern edge of the Andes Mountains. So those Andes that go all the way down to the end of South America, this is them, right? So I'm at the other end of them, right? And so the continental divide that actually continues on up into North America, eventually becomes the Rocky Mountains at some point. Because the Rockies come through Central America as well. And so they meet down here somewhere. And people argue about it when I say where it ends and begins. I don't know. Anyway, so let them argue. But the Rockies and the Andes meet here somewhere. And so they're not huge mountains, but they are jungle mountains, and they're the tallest is over 5,000 feet. People actually do, believe it or not, in the Darien die of hypothermia sometimes, because believe it or not, because it is, you can be 4,000 or 5,000 feet up there, and also when you're wet and laying on the cold ground, I mean, it'll vacuum that heat right out of you. And so it's not like it's a huge number of people die of hypothermia, but there are hypothermia deaths of the people crossing through. And, because now they bring a lot of sleeping pads and that sort of thing. So it might be uncomfortable, but they probably don't actually die. So it's a very, they call it the tampon in Spanish, tampon del Darien, the tampon of the Darien, which is the plug, right? Because there is no road for about 60 miles, right? And we've kept it like that intentionally. I say we, it used to be the United States, but now it's being opened. And there's various reasons to keep it like that. One is it's a military barrier to keep Panama from being invaded. It's also a biological barrier, which keeps a lot of bad things out that could make it back north, like screwworms, which is something that I and Masako Ganaha reported on about 3.5 years ago or so, that we thought the screwworms, which are, long story short, the screwworms are a terrible pest in the United States. They eat a lot of meat, right? They flesh-eating larva of a fly.
Lovely.
And they eat billions of dollars worth of livestock, right? And they kill people too. But way back in the 60s and 70s, our previous generations of Americans fought those screwworms back. They irradiated billions of male flies, which mate with the female flies. And then the irradiated males were sterile. And so this caused the population of the flies to collapse. And they fought them all the way down through the United States, down through Mexico, through Central America. And the front line is the Darien Gap, right? So the United States Department of Agriculture has a facility here in Panama. I asked them about 3.5 years ago to tour it, and they just gave me a stiff arm. And that was when I started publishing that I think that screwworms will make it back to the United States. Because I've dealt with a lot of governments over many years, and I know when I get a response like that, they're covering up. It's like a cop that comes up. You've been a cop for a long time, and you come up and he's like, "No, I'm not doing anything wrong." He smells like dope, looks like dope,
Right.
And so I started publishing it. I think the screwworms are going to make it back to the United States. And people are like, "Ah, that's crazy. What are you even talking about? What are screwworms?" And now they're back in the United States.
And now
so
they're back.
If you look up screwworms now, and you'll see that it's actually, they are back, and this can be extremely costly for us and our protein supply, even while food prices, explode, and the Chinese are coming through the Darien Gap and buying farmland and growing dope all over America now instead of food.
So let me ask the obvious question, and then I also want to go back to again, like the immigration thing. But how is this happening? Like the U.S., this is truly in our backyard. It's not that far. We still have big presence in Panama. How are these things allowed to happen? We know the obvious answer is like because the people in charge want them to happen. I know you can say a few words about the UN Migration Center that's there, right in the canal zone that you were reporting from recently when I saw you. But how is this stuff allowed to happen? How is it that a faction of our state institutions are engaged actively in actually trying to eradicate us? Like, how do we get here? How do things get this nuts?
Right. The Department of Homeland Security is openly, nakedly causing the invasions. There is no squeaky room, no room for interpretation. They are openly doing it, right? Like the department, you see the Border Patrol, for instance. I've been across the entire border from SpaceX to San Diego. I've seen the Border Patrol load thousands of people onto the buses and bring them in, right? I was physically in Darien when Alejandro Mayorkus, the head of Department of Homeland Security, flew down. I waited for 4 days for him. He came down in 4 Black Hawk helicopters. Those were Southcom helicopters, Southern Command helicopters. He came down with General Laura Richardson. She's the commander of Southcom. Came down with the ambassador of the United States, went to Darien and brought more money to increase the flow. This was in the open. They were putting it on their X feed, their Twitter account, right? And I've got photos. I've got drone footage, the whole works. Our government is doing it, full stop, end of story, right?
No debate.
And then they're blaming Colombia and Panama and Mexico. And they're like, well, Mexico could stop it or Panama could stop it. I'm like, hello, McFly, our government is forcing the Panamanian government to do this. Our government is doing it and then blaming Panama. And it is open. There is no squeaky room whatsoever. No way we could reinterpret this in a more positive light. Nope. Our government's doing it, and they're doing it with the United Nations.
And so the play here is so that folks can really follow along. Obviously, there is a, well, I want you to sort of lay it out, but in broad strokes, right? There is a faction of the world, the globalists or the people who support global governance, who are using these multinational institutions and also national ones, in the case of Mayorkus and DHS, to effectively try to strip out state sovereignty, right? That like your borders aren't your borders. Your borders are what we say they are, right? And anybody we say can come and go is allowed to come and go. I mean, is that basically like, is that the angle here? Is that the whole game is to try to destroy what's left of people's identity, cultural, right, state sovereignty, all the rest of it? Is that what's going on? Is that really a fair assessment?
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
it's 100% accurate. And again,
Yep.
they don't hide it. The only people that call this conspiracy theory are actually quite stupid people at this point, because this is 2025. And stupid or young. If you're young, I get it. You haven't had a chance
Sure.
to develop the knowledge set. But if they, and I hate to use the word stupid, and I've always been taught since I was a child, don't say that word. But
Right,
the
right.
bottom line is, this is straight up stupid.
No, they're
Because
stupid. Yeah.
we've literally reached the point where, if you douse yourself with gasoline and smoke a cigarette, that's called stupid, right? And that's what's happening. And at some point, you just have to call stupid stupid. And now people ask me all the time, they say, this doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? And I was like, I can't read their mind because I'm not stupid like that. And I'm
Yeah.
not insane, right? This is the only people that would do this would have a totally different worldview than I have, right? I don't have their worldview. I cannot read their mind. I can read their
Yeah.
words. I can read what they say. I can read their actions. By
Actions.
their
Yeah.
actions, they are enemies. They are enemies, and I mean not opponents. I mean enemies that are lethal and are killing the United States and Europe and Canada, Australia, Japan too. I mean, a lot of people say Japan would never do this, but again, they're wrong. It's happening in Japan, just like it's happening in other places. I'm in Japan all the time. I assure you it's happening in Japan. It's not happening in places like China. It's not happening in Russia. It's not happening in places like that haven't lost their mind. Hungary is not allowing it to happen, but Hungary will be, I mean, they're a little speck
They're surrounded.
in a big sea, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's going to change? I know you have like with everything, right? You have a very realistic view of Trump, who he is, what he says versus what he does. What could potentially change, and do you see signs that anything is going to change, or what would be the tell that says, "Hey, they're serious. We're going to turn the tide here," or not?
Trump's people reach out to me every day at this point. It used to be they'll reach out to me once a week or so, but I'm talking multiple different avenues within his organization, not just one. Like Tom Homan reached out to me a few weeks ago as an example. He called up, and others of his stature.
Who is
Like
Tom again? Like, what is his place in?
he'll be the new border czar.
Okay, yeah, of
And
course.
he was asking what to do down here. And I'm like, close the United Nations, right? If Trump is deadly serious about stopping the invasions, one of the serious tells will be if he defunds the United Nations. If he defunds the United Nations, that's a clear indicator that he's deadly serious. If he defunds them and starts arresting people in the United Nations that are involved in child trafficking and other human trafficking, it looks like he's deadly. If he's just doing mass deportations, okay, it looks serious to the average Joe, but to somebody like me who lives on the front lines, you're a joke, right? You have to go after the arsonist. The arsonists are the people within our government and European governments and the people in the United Nations who are actually doing this. Those are the arsonists. Stamping out fires doesn't work. You have to stamp out the arsonists, and we know who the arsonists are. This isn't vague. We know their names. Amy Pope at the International Organization for Migration, as an example, in her New York office. She's an American. She's directly involved in the human trafficking, right? All these people need to be investigated and in many cases arrested, right? And if you start doing this, the United Nations will collapse under its own weight, especially if Trump is deadly serious. He will. I've said this to people like Mike Flynn and others in recent days, right? If Trump is deadly serious, he will announce that he's defunding the United Nations by January 25th. If not, I'm going for him, right? I'm not waiting for 5 years. I'm not waiting for 5 months. I'm not giving him a grace period of 5 weeks. It's 5 days. You got 5 days. We know who's doing it. If in 5 days, first day number 1, you gotta let the January 6th people go. I mean, day 1, you need to do that. If you don't do it by day 2, you're not serious, right?
Right.
This is dead serious. This is not like we got to study this. We don't have to study it. We know who the arsonists are. Release the January 6th political prisoners and immediately go for the throat of the United Nations. If you don't immediately go for it, then we're in opposition.
Yeah, yeah. Then follow-up questions here. Have you briefed Trump?
No, but people around him constantly.
Did you get any indication? I mean, Tom probably.
I've never asked to talk with Trump. I've never asked to talk. I'm not even. I don't want to be. You know, when I was offered to go meet with President Bush, I turned it down right during the Iraq War. You see all the big bloggers that were all around the table with him, having lunch with him, and everybody's like, "Where's Michael Yon?" Because of those about top 10 bloggers, my readership was probably 10 times greater than all those 10 combined.
Why?
Right? And
why? Because you were wise to what BS the guy was pumping out from the start?
On the Iraq War, it took me time. I spent about 2 years in the Iraq War and 2 in the Afghan War, right? But it wasn't like I was insulting him. I didn't want to give the appearance that I am on your team. I'm not. I'm an American. I'm on Team America, right? And Trump will come and go. Bush came and went. Well, they're still there. They're still players, right? They're still hardcore players. But he's just not president anymore. I mean, Bush, right? And not just him, but also whether it's Obama or any of these other clowns, right? I mean, Biden, of course, I don't even count him because what is he? He's just a walking blob,
president. Yeah, exactly. What is Tom Homan? I mean, by his questions, can you tell what he's thinking? Can you tell, like, is he tipping his hand at all to you based on the kind of questions he's asking you?
I know numerous people that know him personally, and every one of them say Tom Homan is a very serious man. None have said otherwise. None have said otherwise. So, I mean, I know people that worked with him. I know people a friend is a close advisor as his. That's just a coincidence, actually. Or maybe it's not a coincidence. It's just because we kind of roll in big circles that do things, you know? And so, but I know a couple of people that are advisors to Tom Homan and several that are on the next level of advisor, not direct. They can't call him up immediately, but their word gets to him. But the bottom line is they all have told me without exception that Tom Homan is serious. Now I said, that's great. I will judge for myself, of course. And I will definitely help him. I will 100%. If he's deadly serious about closing these borders and not blaming Panama. Blaming Panama it's a non-starter. Panama wants to close the Darien Gap. Panama has been very clear about it. The President Molino is he's actually been very pro-American. And Panama itself in general Panama itself is more pro-American than most Americans are. And I'm serious about it. I'm not joking.
No, I see it too.
Right? And you come here. I mean, and so a lot of Americans are immediately like, hey, we got to do this. Why are they doing these bad things? I'm like, they're not. They openly want to close the Darien Gap, and we keep it open and then blame them. That doesn't help our friendship, right?
Yeah, that doesn't square.
And Panama doesn't want to have China taking this place over. But the United States is like, for instance, I was talking with a Trump advisor yesterday and this morning, actually, about why are American contractors not bidding on the work here? For instance, bridge number 4. Chinese are the main deal with bridge 4, and the Japanese are funding it, and the Germans are involved. But when you look at, like a Trump advisor asked me last night, he goes, do you know how many American companies actually bid on bridge number 4, which is being built not far from me? I said 0. And he goes, that's right, 0, because we looked into it as well. Why are no Americans bidding on the contracts here? We just left. It's not like the Monroe Doctrine, we're being taken over. We left the vacuum and China is filling it. That's what's literally happening. So
what is that? Is that because American firms are too bloody expensive or they can't compete some other way? Like what is the possible explanation for that?
Good question. Oh, I mean, again, we were talking about that last night over dinner and over a phone call. And then this morning, it's like the same thing. We're asking the same question. Why? For instance, there's one article in the papers talking about how U.S. universities wanted to have campus space at Ciudad del Saber, which University of South Florida, I think, not, or University of Florida, not UF, but the Seminoles. They've got a campus here in Panama City, but other universities, some of the others who wanted to make campuses here, they were going to be forced to give bribes, and they wouldn't do it. It's illegal for American companies to give bribes, right? It's illegal for Canadian companies to give bribes as well. So this may be one of the reasons, because some of these people that would come in here, it's illegal for us to give bribes, but you're competing against people who will, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
we
normal
don't know
in that
if
part of
we
the
don't
world
know
as
if
well.
that's the only reason. We don't know. We don't know if there's and we're looking into it hard, because everybody's asking the exact same question that you asked. Why are we gone when we're right down the road? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Plus, we have such good relations with Panama, and it doesn't make any sense unless there's some other reason. It makes business sense for some reason. We just have to really drill down and find what the truth is.
Well, but so much doesn't make sense about the way, again, like just trying to get your mind around, like Mayorkus and the entire globalist cabal of people who are clearly criminally insane, number one, but like, how did they end up on top if the world goes into chaos? This is something that obviously some calculation must have gone into that. Like just looking at the big picture and going, so there's actual people in the actual institutions that run our society who are actively seeking this kind of trouble. Are you fucking kidding me? You know, and just being confronted with that reality over and over. I mean, I notice you don't have any hair. I don't know if it's because you pulled it all out, but I would be very, very, like, I'd be frustrated. And, you know, the other thing that comes up is this is a deadly dangerous situation. I mean, these people are very powerful. They are losing. I mean, they're on the ropes now, at least by appearances. The sea change has come. We'll see, you know, what actually plays out. We don't know. Like you said, you'll be one of the first guys to know if there's actual serious intent to, again, right, the office of the United Nations, the immigration office, right, that runs all of this bullshit, is right there in Panama, in the canal zone where I know you were filming recently, because I saw it. That's appalling. That's unbelievable. That used to be a U.S. military installation, and these are the people actually forwarding this agenda to make these things happen. That this has to be a very seriously dangerous situation. Do you worry about that as well? Are you also a little bit on edge because of what could happen if there's I don't know, somebody decides to sort of throw sand in the gears and right?
Right. I mean, you know, you're asking fundamental questions that are such basic importance that they're as important as, say, mathematics. You know, why would people do this? Like, for instance, why would these people in California vote for the sort of government that they have now that then caused them to get burned down, right? That, you know, left the reservoirs empty and their insurance is canceled and why would they do this, right? You know, one thing I've seen in my travels and study around the world, you know, I spend most of my time traveling around the world, right? And I have most of my life as I've been all over the United States and a lot of the world, right? And I read a lot of old books, right? So I'm always seeing patterns pop up, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is that behavior scales up and down, right? Like you have entire cultures that go insane. Like an entire culture can go insane, right? It can go from sane to insane. It can go from drugs, from no drugs to being a cultural drug addict, right? Yeah. I come back to the United States and my country is on drugs, like quite literally, right? Coast to coast.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Yep. And it's a drug addict country. And I mean, whether that's alcohol or whatever sort of dope or it's prescription
food medications. Yeah, dope.
I can see it. I can see it when I'm home. I can smell it on the streets. I see it in the behavior. People will defend their bongs and their bars more than they'll defend our border. They'll eat their chicken wings and watch football, and the girl will serve their stuff while our border is being invaded. That's insane. That's straight up insane. And now, why would an individual become a fentanyl addict? Why would an individual become a dope addict or an alcoholic? Why would an individual do these things? I don't know, but they do every single day. And entire cultures do this. You know, Argentina 100 years ago was one of the richest countries in the world. You were just there, right? They had a serious train system. It was one of the richest countries back then. There used to be a saying, as rich as an Argentinian, right? Right. rich Argentinians used to sail over to Europe, and they would have more than one ship, and they would have their cows and stuff on one ship, so they'd have fresh milk, right? They would bring their farm with them to Europe and then sail back to Argentina, right? They literally take their fresh food with them. They're growing food on the ships and stuff. So, I mean, but they over time became socialist over time, and then, well,
They went insane.
what happened. You saw what happened. I mean, so why would I spent a lot of time with communists in communist countries, and let me tell you what, if you weren't anti-communist before, you will be when you're within a no kidding. When I was in East Germany, or when I was in Romania, when it was still communist, I'm telling you, that's when I became no kidding hardcore anti-communist, right? I mean, I was growing up teaching communists are bad and all that but stuff, but I'd never seen them. Like, what's a communist do? What do they do? You know? And then I started going to the communist countries. I'm like, oh yeah, that's worth fighting. That's worth fighting. Full hardcore fighting, right?
But put your feet on the ground and draw the line.
But communism practically sells itself. It's like a firmware that installs itself into some brains, right? It's like a self-installing firmware as part of its nature, right? Over time, that firmware is evolved, and that firmware is quite powerful. You've got to really scrub it out, and then there'll be a few seeds still out there, and it just keeps blossoming like kudzu, you know?
I saw it. I was in Cuba, of all things, in 1998. Obviously Cuba's probably very different now. Worse, better, I don't know. No European money, no money was really going in at all. So I had this really raw experience. And, my impression was everybody sort of talked out of the side of their mouth about like what was really going on. Cops on every corner. If you had too much interaction with tourists, the people were nervous, right? The people were nervous, like, well, we have to talk over here where the police can't see us. Like everybody's scared all the time. Like it's an appalling state of affairs. And it's like herpes, communism. Like once you get it, right, it's very hard to get rid of. So I'm with you there. But what a wild time we're living through, Michael. Like what an unbelievably wild, tumultuous, everything is up for grabs kind of period we're going through. I keep trying to stop myself from saying we're about to go through. I mean, we're in it. It's happening right now, and the guys like you are reporting on it. And so
we're in it. We're going supersonic. We're breaking the sound barrier right now. You know what I mean?
It's going to be
literally, we're literally. It's clear that conditions are being set for massive famines, right? It's going to take it's going to take time, but it's clear that those conditions are increasing, right? It's all about conditions, like these fires that just happened in. Actually, there's a fire right now in Patagonia, by the way. But these fires that I just got a message from there. But the fires, for instance, or let's say let's just go to the fires in California. That's all about conditions. People often ask me like, what will be the spark of such and such? I'm like, sparks don't matter. Sparks are like, it's all about conditions, because when like the Darien Gap is a rainforest, you can have a 747 filled with fuel crash into the Darien Gap, and it's not going to burn down the Darien Gap. It's a rainforest. You'll have a big hole that's on fire for a while, and then it'll stop, right? Because the conditions aren't ripe for the Darien Gap to burn down. But, if you let the fuel build up in California, you let the reservoirs go dry, you got DEI, fire department that's a bunch of clowns. You got the government's a bunch of clowns. You got people clearly setting conditions for this, right? So it's all about setting conditions, because then sooner or later the spark's coming. You don't have to be an arsonist. You're an arsonist by setting conditions. You're like a high-level arsonist when you're setting conditions. Now, it can take years to set those conditions, and they've been doing it, right? It can take literally generations to set conditions for some of these information campaigns that we're in the middle of. For instance, the heavy drug use in the United States. One of the most serious WMDs out there is just intoxicants, whether that's alcohol or whatever. And and so it takes in all these, I find all the time in old books, like one I found recently in Argentina, and it was talking about in the 1700s. I think it was it was a book from 1648 actually, and it was talking about how the Spaniards were using alcohol to rob the Indians in Guatemala, right? And so I find this all the time. And I'm not looking for it. I'm reading about other stuff, and I'm like, and there's the opium, or there's the alcohol again, and Americans have done it to the Native American Indians, and it's just Chinese are always doing it with opium, and Chinese are always like, oh, the British did this, that, in the two
No.
opium wars. But in fact, the Chinese have been using the same opium all over the world since before that and afterwards. Still do it. They're still bringing fentanyl into Taiwan as an example. One of the things, by the way, I found
Great news.
with traveling in the world is that professional victims are always predators. I've never seen an excuse of that. Whether that is at an individual level of a single person, if it's somebody that's like always, I'm a victim, that person is going to stab you in the back for sure.
That's right.
And that scales up to families. That's okay. Let's talk about gypsies as an example. If you know any gypsies, or maybe you are one, you can ask, why do the gypsies, like I've asked gypsies, why do gypsies steal from everybody? And people go, oh, you can't say that. And I'm like, why not? Ask a gypsy. And a gypsy will tell you. Like, I've spent a lot of time with gypsies in Romania and Poland and all over the place, right? And so ask them. Ask a gypsy, why do you steal? That it's built into their firmware. The fourth nail, on the crucifixion, if you know what I'm talking about. It's a myth that they have that a gypsy tinkerer, one of the metalsmiths, he stole the fourth nail from Christ's crucifixion and there's different ways they tell the story. So it may vary depending on which gypsy tells you the story. But so the fourth nail, a gypsy stole it and used it to repair his wagon or something. And so since that time, God has given the gypsies, somehow this leaps to, and God gives the gypsies the right to steal anything
the right
they
to
want
steal whatever they want
and be forgiven. So ask a gypsy, just ask them, right? That's built into their firmware that they can steal anything that they want, right?
Wild.
And it's literally part of their firmware, and they will tell you that, right?
Yeah. Victimhood, scalability, right? What's true for the individual can also be true for the larger group, for an entire nation. What else did I want to ask you? I mean, you called the blowing up of Nord Stream. You predicted the shutting down of Groningen. Again, like I said at the top, you're a serious guy. Like, this is not something that when somebody hears from you, when somebody hears you talk, like, you don't ignore somebody with your experience making these kind of statements and predictions. Again, Europe is in deep trouble from just about any angle you look at. I mean, the idea that the people running Europe are fully on board with, you're not going to have food anymore. Like, what? Like, what are these people doing? I talked to Tom Luongo recently, if you know who this gentleman is. I really like the guy. He's enormously entertaining and very knowledgeable. And, his basic hit is that there is a faction of people, partly because this is his theory. He explained it very clearly, so I'm not putting words in his mouth. The Brits never really gave up on the idea that the U.S. sort of won and that we get to go our own way. Like, the British still have this very strange idea that they actually do have, big influence in the world. And so they're trying to punch above their weight class. I think it is clear, right, that they got in over their heads, right? They're stand to lose a lot of money, it appears to me, right, with their whole misadventure in Ukraine, if they don't get us all killed, right, in a confrontation with Russia. But for various reasons, like Tom's theory is basically there is a faction of the global elites who really do operate above the law, and they are losing their hold on power. They're actually in deep, deep trouble, which makes for very, very dangerous. Like, we're in a very dangerous moment historically because regimes do come and go. Right, you mentioned 1648, right? A book from 1648. That's the year of the Westphalian Treaty, sort of establishing the sanctity of sovereign nation states, sort of the world system that lasted up until more or less 1814, right? When the French Revolution and Napoleon was doing his thing, which was another world order, which gave rise to the next world order, which fell and collapsed in 1914 with the start of World War I. And like, we're living through the breakdown of a world order. That's what's happening. It's a really historic thing to witness. It's also incredibly volatile and chaotic and dangerous and dangerous, right? And so, what's good advice from Michael Yon about, I'm an average dude. I get to work from home remotely. What do I do to protect my family? What do I do to keep, what do I do to keep both oars in the water mentally? But also, like, how do I protect myself financially, physically? What kind of things do you see as being sort of essential fundamentals at a time when the old order is breaking down? And, you may have to be a little bit flexible on what your plans are for the next 10 to 20 years.
Amazingly important question. everybody watching this, all of us, all of our families have been through famines and wars and pandemics. Nobody watching this comes from a family tree that didn't go through endless wars and famines and pandemics, right? So we're survivors. We got the right stuff, but you have to pay attention, right? You have to very much pay attention, because they're coming at us with the highest forms of warfare, information war, obviously. And psychological warfare is a subset of information war, which they are the beast. Keep in mind, there's many different beasts. There's the Chinese Communist Party.
Yep.
There's various factions of the Europeans and Americans, Bill Gates sorts, the Soros sorts, and they're frenemies, and they'll fight each other and they'll help each other as well. And they're all hitting us with their own versions of information war, right? And remember, when you're conducting a very serious information war, you really want your target to be drugged or drunk, right? I mean, that's the grease of information war, is intoxicants. That's why I go after Joe Rogan, the Doper Joe, and I call him the Doper Joe because I want that to stick, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and you see Elon Musk and Doper Joe smoking drugs,
Smoking weed,
in
yep.
front of millions of young people, and people go, "Oh, you're against freedom." Nope. At no point did I say that. I'm just going to call you an idiot. I'm just going to stigmatize you. I'm going to stigmatize you. I'm not going to say you should be in prison or any of that. I'm going to say you're a loser, and you're trying to get young people to be losers like you, who will guard your bong but not guard our border, right? You'll guard, and you'll vote for somebody like Trump to save you, or Biden to save you, or Clinton, or all these other trash guys, Obama. They're not going to save us. They're going to come and go, and they're all part of that other system. Trump is as globalist as any of these guys, right?
Interesting.
Now, the fact that I say this constantly, and Trump's team constantly reaches out to me, right? And some of it's quite obvious in public, right? I mean, they know there's a lot of patriots that are very close to Trump, but they see him as the best of the worst choices, right? I totally get it. I mean, there's people that I will support to the end who are true patriots, and not all of them are Americans. They might be patriots for Japan, or patriots for Germany, or patriots even for the United Kingdom. There's many forms of globalists, by the way. There's many. Globalist is nothing new. We talk about this as if it's something new. But globalism comes in so many different firmwares. There's communists, socialists, there's Christians. I'm Christian. We're total globalists. And there's Islam, of course. Muslims are globalists. Jews have a different form of globalism, more about not making everybody Jewish, but taking over the cockpits. Chinese are hardcore globalists. I mean, like, you've never seen globalists, but Chinese sell themselves in such a way that most people are like, no, only America is the great imperial power. It's like, you're out of your mind. You study history a lot, so I don't need to give you the briefing. There are so many could you even list them off the top of your head in the next 10 minutes? How many forms of globalists you know?
Right, exactly. No, the Chinese have been very clever, and to what degree they're sincere when helping people out of poverty. The Belt Road Initiative, I mean, this is a tremendous achievement if they can pull it off, because obviously a lot of things could happen in the next 10 to 20 years. But their effort to brand themselves, hey, we brought a bunch of people out of poverty in our country, we can help you do the same. Here's what we need from you, and here's what you get in return, is working. Right? It appears to me that it's working. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, the U.S. has a big image problem right now, and justifiably so. Like, like our government has really earned the enmity that they get and that they deserve all around the world. But nonetheless, right? Like, how to turn this ship around. I want to check in with you. I want to respect your time too, Michael. I appreciate you coming on and staying on so long. I want to check in with you after, I don't know, in the first 100 days. Like, let's do another call. Let's see what's going on. Let's get the update from Panama. Let's find out how serious Trump's people are. Let's see what's changing, if anything, and let's get your take on what's going on.
January 26th, because by January 25th, if Trump is not openly going for the throat of the United Nations, I'm like, you're done.
You'll know.
That'll be the only tell that I need on how serious he is about this, right? If you're going for the United Nations throat, you're a serious man, right? If you're not, you're just helping the invasion.
Well, we will hear from you then or shortly after then, because I know your travel schedule keeps you busy. Michael, thank you very much for your time, my friend. That was really excellent. I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. We'll get this out to as many people as we can.
Thank you, sir.
All the best. Yep. Take care. Have a good day. If you enjoyed the show, please hit the subscribe button, or even, dare I say, give us a like. And be sure to check out Michael's excellent Substack. And you can also follow him on Twitter. That's in the show notes below. And also, if you're interested in international diversification, now is the time to make steps and make moves in that direction. And you're still free to do a lot of these things. Nobody knows how much longer that's going to be the case. So check out my free download, a 56-page book I call the Bulletproof Plan B. This is the important information that will get you up to speed quickly on how you put distance between yourself and your biggest risk, which is your home government. Living an international lifestyle and knowing that you can move between borders and different legal jurisdictions and setting up the kind of legal structures that will protect your wealth and help protect your family and your own safety if things really come off the rails is about the smartest thing you can be doing right now. So thanks very much for watching. That's enough out of me. I'll be back with more great stuff.